All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today we're uncovering a seriously hidden piece of history. When we think about sports, right, we usually picture entertainment, fierce competition, maybe some national pride. But what our source material reveals today, it's way deeper than that. We're heading back to post-abolition Brazil to see how something as simple, as everyday as organizing a local sports club literally became a radical act of survival and defiance. So, we've got to start with this fascinating question. Can a sports club actually start a revolution? Or maybe a better way to phrase it is, why on earth did marginalized people turn to leisure activities like sports when they were quite literally fighting for basic survival? It kind of seems counterintuitive, doesn't it? I mean, if you're facing severe economic hardship and you're completely shut out of society, why spend your incredibly limited time and money kicking a ball around or putting together a rowing team? Well, as you're going to see, these early clubs were never just about the game. They were practically pressure cookers for negotiating power in a society that had just gone through a massive seismic shift. Section 1. The illusion of freedom. We really need to set the stage first to understand the stark reality of post-abolition Brazil, where legal emancipation definitely did not equal true freedom. So, the year is 1888. This marks the monumental legal victory of the abolition of slavery in Brazil. Millions of enslaved individuals were legally emancipated, which absolutely was a massive moral imperative. But, and this is a big but, the deeply ingrained structures of racial and social inequality, they didn't just vanish overnight. The agrarian economy still completely relied on manual labor, and the system essentially just refused to integrate this newly freed population into the formal workforce fairly. Instead of a fresh start, they were hit with immediate exploitation, terrible wages, and pretty much zero chance to move up in the world. And things moved fast. Right after abolition in 1889, Brazil transitions to a republic. You think, okay, great, a fresh democratic start for everyone. But actually no, they instituted these incredibly strict property and literacy requirements for voting. So what did that do? It effectively disenfranchised the vast majority of the newly freed population. The whole Republican ideal of equality was frankly an illusion for most people. By enforcing these strict rules, the political system slammed the door shut, locking Afro-Brazilians and the working poor completely out of the democratic process. Now, what's really striking here is the sheer contrast. On paper, sure, legal freedom was achieved, but the actual, lived socioeconomic reality, that was still entirely defined by precarious labor, intense exploitation, and persistent prejudice. And you know what that does? It creates a massive vacuum in society. People were legally free, but structurally, they were entirely trapped. They desperately needed spaces where they could actually exercise some autonomy, build a collective identity, and figure out their goals, completely outside of the dominant political and economic systems that were actively working against them. Which brings us to Section 2, microcosms of social reconstruction. Because they didn't have state-provided social safety nets, marginalized communities turned to early sports clubs, turning them into these vital sanctuaries. The absolutely crucial thing to grasp here is that for individuals who used to be defined entirely by their labor and their lack of freedom, sports offered this profound way to reclaim their physical agency, to actually experience achievement. I really want you to think about the psychological weight of this for a second. If you or your parents had been legally classified as property, literally defined by exhausting manual labor, the act of using your body for joy, for mastery, for teamwork, that is a total paradigm shift. The sports club became this unique framework where your human worth was suddenly based on your skill and your camaraderie, not your social status. And it went way beyond just the physical. By forming these clubs, members were stepping into radical acts of self-governance. I'm talking about establishing rules, electing leaders, managing resources. They were empowering individuals who were completely shut out of the formal political process. They weren't just playing games out there. They were literally building miniature democracies. They managed their own resources, they held votes for their officials, they resolved their own disputes. It gave them the hands-on, practical civic experience that the Brazilian Republic had flat out denied them. Moving right along to Section 3, the political arena. Let's see how this internal club camaraderie scaled up into real external political power, directly challenging those established social hierarchies. This illustrates the pipeline perfectly, straight from the pitch to politics. It turns out the exact same skills you hone while negotiating a club dispute translate beautifully into leading broader community initiatives. It's a super clear progression. Think about it. A charismatic player who figures out how to organize a local tournament, balance the club's really tight budget, and give a fired-up speech to the team. Well, that person suddenly has the exact skill set needed to lobby the local government for neighborhood improvements or to organize a protest against unfair housing practices. Through public matches and big community gatherings, these clubs provided a highly visible platform to voice collective concerns. We're talking about calling out racial discrimination and economic inequality. In a society that rigidly enforced class and racial boundaries, bringing thousands of people together in public just to watch a match, that was undeniably powerful. The clubs became these incubators for political consciousness. Surrounded by their peers, members became acutely aware of their rights and their collective power, which essentially forced broader society to face the unfinished business of emancipation. Section 4, Soccer's Sociopolitical Transformation. To really ground this history, let's look at a specific case study in major urban centers like Rio de Janeiro and São Paulo, the beautiful game itself, football. Now, football was initially introduced as a pastime for European immigrants and the upper classes, but it was rapidly adopted by working-class and Afro-Brazilian communities out in the peripheral neighborhoods. It's so fascinating because football definitely did not start as a people's game in Brazil. It was an elite import. But as the sport caught on, marginalized groups essentially hijacked it and claimed it as their own. It gave them an alternative to the streets and a real chance for young men from impoverished backgrounds to achieve some visible success and social mobility, even if it was limited at first. These urban clubs quickly morphed into massive engines for social integration. We're talking passionate matches, vibrant displays of music and dance, stuff that just forced the rest of society to recognize their collective power. Building up these intense local rivalries created a fierce neighborhood pride that actually transcended racial divides within those specific areas. You literally couldn't ignore them anymore. The massive crowds, the celebrations, the sheer cultural footprint of these games meant that marginalized communities were physically taking up space in the urban landscape and demanding to be seen. Finally, Section 5, the power of social capital. As we wrap up this explainer, we really need to dig into the underlying sociological mechanics here. Like, why exactly were these clubs so incredibly effective? It all boils down to social capital. These clubs forged incredibly robust interpersonal networks that provided the mutual support and the vital information exchange necessary for these marginalized communities just to survive. Look, when the state provides absolutely no safety net, your safety net becomes your neighbor. It becomes your teammate. The bonds built out there on the field became the exact same networks people used to find a job, to share food during hard times, or to rally support when somebody faced an injustice. And then there's resource mobilization, pooling their extremely limited time and money to hit shared goals. By doing this, members built alternative platforms for action when formal political avenues were completely barricaded against them. And honestly, this is the brilliance of the whole thing. Individually, sure, they had next to zero financial power. But by pooling those tiny individual resources together just to buy uniforms, rent a dirt field, or host a neighborhood event, they created sustainable institutions. They leveraged what tiny bit they had and turned it into a unified, undeniable force. So, understanding the profound political power of community and leisure, we really have to ask ourselves a question. Where are the incubators of social change hiding in plain sight in your own community today? The legacy of post-abolition Brazilian sports clubs proves that recreation and revolution are sometimes just two sides of the exact same coin. The next time you walk past a local community center, a neighborhood sports league, or even a seemingly simple hobby group, just remember, you might actually be looking at the next great engine for social transformation. Keep questioning, keep looking a little bit closer, and hey, thanks for joining me on this explainer.